The moment I answer Ryan's call, his voice cracked in a way I'd never heard in 10 years of friendship. Ethan, about the 12,000 I can't pay you back right now, and there's something I need to tell you that I've been hiding since college. Those words slammed into me like a cold Chicago wind off the lake, freezing every excuse I'd built around our bond. I stood in my loft apartment, phone pressed so hard to my ear that my knuckles whitened, staring at the rainy skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. $12,000. My entire emergency fund, handed over 6 months earlier without a single question because he'd said his mother had stage 3 cancer and the treatments weren't covered. I believed him. I always believed him. The memory flooded back in sharp detail. It had been a humid July evening downtown. Ryan showed up at my door pale and shaking, eyes red from crying. "Mom's sick, Ethan. Real sick. Doctors in Texas say she needs this new drug regimen immediately or..." He couldn't finish. I didn't need him to. I wired the money that night, telling myself it was what any best friend would do. What I didn't admit, even to myself, was the deeper reason I never hesitated. I'd been in love with Ryan Hayes since our freshman year at Northwestern. Not the loud, obvious kind of love. The quiet, aching kind I buried under jokes and late-night video games, and "you're like a brother to me" lies. Now, 6 months later, standing in the same loft where I'd once celebrated landing my first big design contract, I felt the floor tilt. "What do you mean you can't pay me back?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. Ryan's silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, the city noise behind him, honking taxis, distant L train rumble, made the moment feel even more unreal. "It wasn't for my mom, Ethan. She was never sick." I lied. My stomach dropped. I sank onto the leather couch I'd bought with the last of my savings after giving him the money. Rain streaked the windows like tears I refused to let fall. "Then what was it for?" I whispered. Another long pause. I could picture him pacing on Michigan Avenue, light brown hair damp from the drizzle, green eyes avoiding every stranger's gaze the way they always did when he was scared. "I needed it to pay off debts from someone I thought I loved," he said finally. "And I couldn't tell you the truth because I was terrified you'd look at me the same way my father does." His voice broke again. "Ethan, I'm gay, and I've been in love with you since the day we met. I used the lie because I knew you'd help me without asking questions. I knew you cared. I just didn't know how much until it was too late." The words hung between us, heavier than the storm outside. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. All those years of swallowing my feelings, of dating women I never really wanted, of pretending to flutter in my chest when Ryan hugged me, was just friendship. It all crashed down at once. The money suddenly felt like the smallest part of the betrayal. The real shock was the mirror he just shoved in front of me, forcing me to see what I had spent a decade hiding from everyone, including myself. I ended the call without another word. The loft felt too quiet, too empty. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching Lake Michigan churn gray and restless below. $12,000. A mother who was never sick. And the man I loved confessing feelings I had convinced myself were one-sided. In that moment, standing alone in the city I had always called home, I realized the biggest lie wasn't Ryan's. It was mine. The next morning, I called in sick to the design firm, where I spent 60-hour weeks creating sleek logos for tech startups. I couldn't face my open-plan office or the straight colleagues who joked about weekend dates with girls. Instead, I walked the lakefront trail for hours, wind whipping my dark hair, mind replaying every interaction with Ryan since college. The way he always saved me the passenger seat. The way he remembered my coffee order better than I did. The way his laugh lit up rooms and made my chest ache in ways I labeled brotherly. By afternoon, I sat on a bench near Navy Pier, phone in hand, staring at Ryan's last text. "Please let me explain in person. I'm so sorry." I didn't reply. Not yet. The anger was still too raw, but beneath it something else stirred. Relief, maybe, or terror. For the first time in my life, the closet door had been kicked open, and I didn't know whether to step through or slam it shut again. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from my older sister, Claire, back in suburban Naperville. "Mom's been asking why you skipped Sunday dinner again," she said lightly, but I heard the worry underneath. Our parents still believed I was the perfect son who just hadn't met the right girl yet. How was I supposed to tell them the truth when I was still choking on it myself? I mumbled an excuse about work deadlines and hung up, feeling the familiar weight of expectation settle heavier than ever. Days blurred. I avoided Ryan's calls and texts. At night, I lay awake replaying his confession, the money feeling almost irrelevant now. What mattered was the mirror. I had spent years building a life that looked straight on the outside. Successful job, nice apartment, weekend basketball with the guys, while inside I was slowly suffocating. Ryan's lie had forced oxygen into the room, and I wasn't sure I knew how to breathe it. On Friday, I finally agreed to meet him at our usual coffee shop in Lincoln Park. He was already there when I arrived, wearing the same gray hoodie from college, eyes hollow. The moment I sat down, he slid an envelope across the table. It's all I could scrape together, 3,000. The rest is coming, I swear. His voice was hoarse. But Ethan, please believe me. The money was never about using you. It was about being too scared to tell you I loved you. I stared at the envelope, then at him. The cafe smelled of fresh espresso and rain-soaked jackets. Around us, normal people laughed and scrolled phones, oblivious to the earthquake happening at our small table. You lied about your mom dying, I said quietly. That's not fear. That's manipulation. Ryan flinched but didn't look away. I know, and I hate myself for it. My dad found out about me 2 years ago and cut me off completely. I was drowning in credit card debt from therapy and moving here, and I panicked. I knew you'd help. I knew because I've watched you love people quietly your whole life, including me. He reached for my hand, but stopped short, fingers hovering. I was wrong. I should have trusted you with the truth. Something inside me cracked open. Not forgiveness yet, but recognition. I had done the same thing, hidden behind half-truths and safe friendships. I pulled my hand back and stood. I need time, Ryan. Real time. As I walked out into the crisp October air, leaves crunching under my sneakers, I realized the money wasn't what I needed back most. What I needed was the version of myself I had never let exist. The weeks that followed tested every boundary I thought I had. Work suffered. My boss pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. I lied again, saying family stuff. The irony burned. At night, I started journaling, something I'd always mocked as too soft, pouring out years of silence on a pages no one would read. I drove to the North Avenue beach one stormy afternoon and screamed into the wind until my throat hurt. For the first time, the word gay didn't feel like a grenade in my mouth. It felt like the beginning of air. Claire called again, this time more insistent. Mom thinks you're depressed. Come for dinner Sunday, or I'm driving in. I agreed, knowing I couldn't hide forever. Sunday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn sunshine that made Chicago look like a postcard. I parked outside the white colonial house where I grew up and sat in the car for 10 minutes, heart hammering. Inside, the smell of pot roast and my mother's lavender perfume wrapped around me like a hug I no longer trusted. Dinner conversation stayed light until Dad asked about my dating life. Any nice girls at the firm? The question landed like a stone in still water. I set my fork down. Actually, no, and there won't be. The table went quiet. Mom's eyes widened. Claire looked between us, already sensing the shift. I took a breath that felt like the first real one in years. I'm gay. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face hardened the way I had feared since I was 16. You're confused, son. That's all. Mom started crying softly. Claire reached for my hand under the table. In that moment, I understood Ryan's terror completely. The money he borrowed suddenly seemed trivial compared to the price we both paid for hiding. I stood up, kissed Mom's cheek, and left before anyone could say more. Driving back to the city, windows down, cold air whipping through, I felt lighter even as tears blurred the highway lines. Ryan texted that night. I heard from Claire. I'm here if you need me. No pressure. I didn't answer, but I didn't delete the message either. The awakening had begun, painful and necessary, and I was finally walking toward it instead of away. Monday morning, I woke to a text from my boss granting me 2 weeks of unpaid leave. Take the time you need, it read. I stared at the ceiling, sunlight slanting through half-closed blinds, and realized I had no plan. The $12,000 was still mostly gone. My savings account mocked me every time I checked the balance. Yet the financial hole felt secondary to the emotional one Ryan had cracked open. I spent the morning cleaning the loft obsessively, wiping counters, folding clothes, anything to avoid thinking. By noon, I couldn't stand the silence anymore and drove to the Art Institute, losing myself in rooms full of paintings that had always felt safer than people. In front of a large hopper canvas depicting lonely city streets, I felt a presence beside me. Turning, I found Marcus, a colleague from the firm I barely knew beyond polite nods in meetings. Tall, black, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he smiled softly. "Rough week?" he asked. Something in his tone told me he already knew. Chicago's design community was small and word-traveled. We ended up at the museum cafe, talking for hours. He listened without judgment as I spilled fragments of the story, the money, the lie, the confession, my coming out at dinner. "Sounds like your friend lit the match," Marcus said gently. "Now you decide whether to let the fire burn everything down or forge something new." His words stayed with me on the drive home. That evening I finally called Ryan. We met at the same coffee shop, but this time I spoke first. "I'm not ready to forgive the lie yet," I said, "but I'm done hiding. From everyone." Ryan's shoulders dropped with visible relief. "I'll pay you back every cent, even if it takes years. And I'll give you space." We sat in silence after that, two men who had loved each other in secret for a decade, finally breathing the same air without pretense. It wasn't romance yet. It was something more fragile. Honesty. The next few days blurred into meetings with a therapist recommended by Marcus. Dr. Patel's office overlooked the river, and in our first session, I cried harder than I had since childhood. She didn't push. She simply asked questions that peeled back layers I thought were permanent. "What did the money really represent to you?" she asked. I realized it had been proof that Ryan needed me, that my hidden love wasn't completely invisible. Admitting that out loud felt like setting down a weight I hadn't known I carried. Meanwhile, my family situation deteriorated. Dad left voicemails that alternated between anger and confusion. Mom sent long texts quoting Bible verses I had heard my whole life. Only Claire stayed steady, showing up at my door one rainy Thursday with takeout tie and a fierce hug. "You're still my brother," she said simply. "The rest is noise." We ate on the couch while she told me about her own struggles with our parents' expectations. For the first time, I understood that coming out wasn't just about me. It was about rewriting every relationship I had. Ryan kept his word on repayment. He started a payment plan, $500 wired every 2 weeks, and never once used it as leverage to see me. I appreciated the distance, even as I missed him fiercely. Nights were the hardest. I would replay our college days, late study sessions, road trips to Michigan, the way his hand brushed mine accidentally on purpose. The anger slowly softened into grief for all the time we had wasted pretending. By the end of my leave, I felt ready to return to work, though changed. I updated my social media with a simple post, a rainbow flag emoji, and the caption, "Living honestly." The responses flooded in, support from unexpected colleagues, silence from a few others. Marcus texted immediately, "Proud of you. Coffee this week." I smiled at the screen for the first time in weeks. The weekend after I returned to the office, Ryan asked if we could talk somewhere private. We drove to the Indiana dunes, walking the beach as November waves crashed cold and gray. He looked thinner, eyes shadowed. "I've been seeing a therapist too," he admitted. "The lie cost me more than money. It almost cost me you." He stopped walking, turned to face me. Wind whipped his hair. "I don't expect anything, Ethan, but I need you to know the love part was real. Is real." I stared at the horizon where sky met water. The money no longer mattered. What mattered was the choice in front of me. Keep punishing us both for fear, or step into the possibility he had opened. "I believe you," I said finally, "but I need to figure out who I am without the hiding first." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. We walked back to the car in companionable silence, the first peaceful moment since the phone call that changed everything. Back in the city, I threw myself into work with new energy. Designs that once felt safe and corporate now carried subtle personal touches, colors bolder, lines more fluid. My boss noticed and gave me a new project, lead role. Marcus and I started grabbing lunch regularly. He became the friend I hadn't known I needed, someone who had walked the same path years earlier and could answer questions without pity. Thanksgiving approached. Claire invited me to a small gathering at her apartment instead of the family home. Just us and a couple friends who get it, she promised. I accepted. Ryan texted, asking if I wanted company for the holiday. I hesitated, then replied yes. Not as a date, as family, the kind we chose. The dinner was simple and loud with laughter. Marcus brought his partner, Jamal, and the four of us cooked together in Claire's tiny kitchen. Ryan arrived with pumpkin pie and tentative hope in his eyes. Watching him laugh at Marcus's jokes, I felt the last pieces of resentment dissolve. Later, as we washed dishes side by side, he said quietly, "You look lighter." I realized he was right. The money was being repaid. The lie was being healed. And I was finally becoming the man I had always been afraid to meet. Winter settled over Chicago like a heavy coat. Snow muffled the city's sounds, turning streets into soft white corridors. I spent most evenings in my loft working on personal projects, sketching ideas for a graphic novel about two friends who find each other after years of silence. The story mirrored my life, so closely it scared me, but the act of creating felt like therapy. Ryan's payments arrived like clockwork every other Friday, each one accompanied by a short note, "Thinking of you." I saved every note in a drawer, not ready to respond, but unwilling to throw them away. One Saturday, Marcus invited me to a small gathering at a West Loop gallery opening. Low-key, he promised. Mostly queer artists and friends. I went, nervous but curious. The space was bright with track lighting, walls covered in bold abstracts. Within minutes, I was deep in conversation with a sculptor named Leo who had moved from New York the year before. His easy laugh and sharp wit reminded me of Ryan, yet felt different, lighter, without the weight of shared history. We exchanged numbers before the night ended. The next morning, Ryan called. "I saw your Instagram story from the gallery," he said, voice carefully neutral. "You looked happy." There was no accusation, only quiet acceptance. We talked for an hour about nothing and everything. He told me about starting a new job at a nonprofit that helped LGBTQ youth. "Feels good to help kids who are where we were," he said. I told him about the graphic novel. Neither of us mentioned the money or the confession. The conversation felt like the beginning of a new language between us. Christmas came quietly. I flew to my parents' house for one tense day, exchanging gifts and careful small talk. Dad still couldn't meet my eyes fully, but he didn't argue either. Mom hugged me extra tight at the door. On the drive back to the city, I felt both sad and free. Claire called while I was on the highway. "You did good, little brother. They'll come around eventually." I hope she was right. New Year's Eve found me at Marcus and Jamal's apartment with a small group, including Leo. We counted down on the rooftop, overlooking the fireworks exploding over the lake. Leo stood close enough that our shoulders brushed. When the clock struck midnight, he kissed my cheek softly. "To new beginnings," he whispered. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with champagne. January brought the first real test. Ryan's mother actually did get sick. Not cancer, but a serious heart scare that landed her in the hospital in Texas. He flew down immediately and called me from the airport. "I know I lost the right to ask, but would you come with me? I don't want to face this alone." I booked a ticket without hesitation. On the plane, he thanked me quietly. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," I replied. "I'm choosing this." In Houston, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and worry. Ryan's mother, a small woman with the same green eyes, squeezed my hand when he introduced me as his best friend. She didn't know the full story yet. Watching Ryan sit beside her bed, reading aloud from her favorite book, I saw the boy I had fallen for and the man he had become. The money felt like ancient history. What mattered now was presence. We stayed 4 days. On the last night, sitting on the hotel balcony under a clear Texas sky, Ryan said, "I'm still in love with you, Ethan. But I understand if that chapter is closed." I looked at the stars, breath visible in the cool air. "It's not closed," I answered honestly, "but I need to write the next pages myself first." He nodded, tears glistening. We didn't kiss. We simply sat together, hands inches apart, and that was enough. Back in Chicago, the city felt different, brighter somehow. I started dating Leo, casually, coffee dates and museum walks that never pressured me. Ryan and I texted daily, rebuilding friendship on new terms. The graphic novel gained pages. Work promoted me to senior designer. Life, it seemed, was slowly stitching itself back together. One freezing February evening, Ryan showed up at my door with a check for the final $3,000. "Paid in full," he said with a small smile. I took the check but pulled him into a hug instead of letting him leave. "Stay for dinner," I said. We cooked pasta and talked until midnight, laughing about old college stories as if no betrayal had ever happened. When he left, I stood at the window watching his car disappear into the snow. The awakening wasn't dramatic anymore. It was quiet, steady in mine. Spring arrived with sudden warmth that melted the last dirty snow piles along the sidewalks. I celebrated my 30th birthday quietly with Claire, Marcus, and Leo at a small Italian restaurant in Wicker Park. Ryan sent flowers to the office with a card that simply read, "Happy 30. You deserve every good thing." I kept the card on my desk where I could see it every day. Leo and I grew closer. He understood my need for slowness, never pushing for more than I could give. One sunny Saturday, we drove out to Starved Rock for a hike. Standing at the top of a bluff overlooking the Illinois River, he turned to me and said, "I know there's history with Ryan. I'm okay with that as long as you're honest with me." His kindness made my chest ache in the best way. I kissed him then, the first real kiss I had allowed myself since the confession. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. That same week, Ryan asked if I would help him move into a new apartment in Logan Square. The place was smaller but brighter, closer to the nonprofit where he now worked full-time. We spent the day hauling boxes and assembling IKEA furniture, sweating and laughing like old times. At one point, he found an old photo of us from freshman year, arms around each other at a football game, smiling like the world was ours. He held it up. "Remember when we thought we had it all figured out?" I took the photo gently. "We didn't, but maybe we're figuring it out now." The conversation turned serious over pizza on the bare floor. Ryan told me about coming out to his mother in the hospital. She had cried but hugged him and said she loved him anyway. His father still refused contact, but Ryan seemed lighter for having told the truth. "Your courage gave me mine," he said. I didn't know how to respond except to squeeze his shoulder. The money had been repaid months ago. The trust was rebuilding slower but steadily. Work took me to San Francisco for a conference in late April. I walked the hilly streets alone one evening, thinking about how far I'd come. Sitting on a bench in Dolores Park watching the sunset paint the city pink and gold, I called Ryan. "I wish you were here," I said before I could stop myself. He was quiet for a moment. "Me too, but I'm glad you're living it." We talked until the sky turned dark. When I hung up, I felt a new clarity. Love didn't have to be one person. It could grow in different directions and still be real. Back home, Leo met me at the airport with flowers. We spent the weekend exploring the lakefront on bikes, stopping for ice cream and long talks. He told me about his own coming-out story, parents in Atlanta who eventually embraced him after years of struggle. His strength inspired me. That Sunday, I invited Ryan to join us for brunch. Watching the two men I cared about laugh together over mimosas felt like the universe smiling. No jealousy, just gratitude. May brought Pride Month preparations. Marcus asked if I would march with their group. I said yes immediately. Ryan decided to march too. We spent an evening making signs in my loft. Rainbow hearts and the words "love is louder than fear." Leo helped, his artistic touch turning simple poster board into beautiful art. The night before the parade, we all gathered on my rooftop for pizza and music. Sitting there under string lights with these people who had walked beside me through the hardest months, I realized the awakening wasn't a single moment. It was every choice since Ryan's confession. Choosing honesty, choosing community, choosing myself. The parade day dawned bright and perfect. Chicago's streets filled with color and joy. Marching down Halsted with thousands of others, Ryan on one side and Leo on the other, I felt tears mix with the sunlight on my face. People waved and cheered. For the first time, I wasn't watching from the sidewalk. I was in it, fully present, fully me. That evening we collapsed at a block party, exhausted and happy. Ryan pulled me aside near the fountain. "Thank you for letting me be part of this," he said. I hugged him tight. "Thank you for starting it." We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. The love had transformed into something deeper. Friendship forged in fire. Summer heat wrapped Chicago like a blanket. I spent long weekends at the beach with Leo, swimming in the cool lake and talking about everything and nothing. Our relationship deepened naturally. He introduced me to his family over video call, and they welcomed me with open arms. The contrast with my own parents' slow thaw made me grateful. Dad had started sending short texts checking on me. Mom called once a week just to hear my voice. Progress, however small, felt like victory. Ryan threw himself into his nonprofit work, organizing support groups for young queer people. I volunteered once a month, sharing my story and watching kids' faces light up with hope. One teenage boy told me afterward, "You make it seem possible." His words stayed with me for days. The $12,000 that started everything now felt like the best investment I had ever made, not in money, but in the person I had become. In July, Leo and I took a weekend trip to Door County in Wisconsin. We rented a small cabin on the water and spent lazy days kayaking and reading on the dock. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and pink, Leo turned to me and said, "I love you, Ethan." No pressure to say it back. I looked at him, heart full, and replied, "I love you too." The words felt true and light. We kissed under the stars, and for the first time I understood that love didn't have to hurt or hide. It could simply be. Back in the city, Ryan surprised me with tickets to a Cubs game, our old tradition. We sat in the bleachers eating hot dogs and cheering like nothing had changed. During the seventh inning stretch, he leaned over and said, "I'm seeing someone. His name is Tyler. He's a teacher." I smiled genuinely. "I'm happy for you." And I was. The last traces of complicated feelings dissolved in that moment. We had both found our paths. August brought my family's annual lake house trip to Michigan. I invited Leo, and to my surprise, my parents agreed. The week was awkward at first. Dad stiff, Mom overly cheerful. But by the third day, Dad joined us on the boat and actually asked Leo about his work. Small conversations grew into real ones. On the last night around the campfire, Mom hugged me and whispered, "I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Tears stung my eyes. The journey that started with a lie about cancer had led to healing I never expected. Ryan and Tyler joined us for Labor Day weekend at the lake. The six of us, me, Leo, Ryan, Tyler, Claire, and her girlfriend, spent the days swimming, grilling, and laughing until our stomachs hurt. Watching Ryan happy with someone new felt like closing a beautiful chapter. We had survived the betrayal, the awakening, the rebuilding. What remained was friendship stronger than blood. Fall returned with its crisp air and changing leaves. I finished the graphic novel and found a small publisher interested in it. The story of two men learning to love honestly after years of fear would hit shelves next year. Ryan read the manuscript first and cried in my living room. "You told our truth," he said simply. We sat together on the couch where the phone call had started everything, no longer afraid of the past. Leo and I moved in together in October, choosing a bright apartment in Andersonville with room for both our art projects. Ryan and Tyler became regular dinner guests. Marcus and Jamal hosted game nights that filled our home with joy. My parents visited for Thanksgiving and stayed a full week, Dad even attending a local LGBTQ support event with me. The world hadn't ended. It had opened wider. On a quiet November evening, I stood on our new balcony overlooking the neighborhood lights. Ryan texted a photo of him and Tyler at the same Indiana Dunes beach where we had once talked about love. The caption read, "Full circle." I smiled and replied with a heart emoji. The money had been repaid long ago. The real gift was the life I now lived openly. Looking back, the shock of that phone call had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to stop hiding, to face family, society, and myself. It taught me that love sometimes arrives wrapped in pain, but truth always sets us free. Ryan's confession didn't destroy us. It rebuilt us into better men. As winter approached again, I felt ready for whatever came next. The city sparkled with holiday lights, and my heart felt full. I had friends who knew every part of me, a partner who loved me completely, and a best friend who had walked through fire beside me. The awakening was complete. True or false? Sometimes the deepest betrayals are exactly what we need to finally become who we were always meant to be.